It's May 29th, and this is Kate Stalker interviewing Sue Carr. Sue, tell us why you want to share your story.
Well, I'm so involved in the library and so involved in so many parts of the library that I kind of felt like I didn't have a choice. Enough meetings I was sitting in where they were saying, we need people to share their stories. And, I said, I will, and I was also at the first Story Jam and came out of there being very emotional and proud of Monona. And so I signed up. They were passing out a sign-up sheet, and I signed up. Here I am.
Good. Tell me about your parents and grandparents and what effect they might have had on you.
I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My grandparents lived very close to us in Detroit, and my other grandparents lived in Maryland. My parents were both teachers. My dad was an elementary school principal, and my mom was a high school counselor until she quit to raise us, my sister and I. It was a very idyllic childhood, mostly. I walked to my elementary school and I rode my bike all over my neighborhood, much like Monona is. And then my parents got divorced when I was 14, and I went through a fairly troubled period and ended up going to boarding school for the last 2 years of high school. And after that, I wasn't really connected to Ann Arbor anymore. I went to college and found a job and kind of moved on. But I definitely think that both of my parents influenced me a lot in becoming a teacher, as they were both educators and were really committed to that. Plus, I lived this life where both of my parents were off all summer, which was interesting and kind of a unique way to grow up. I come to find out later when I get real jobs and don't have the summer off. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what kinds of things did you do in the summer?
Well, it's interesting. I often tell people that now that I think back, now that I'm a parent, it was interesting because my sister and I both went to camp for either 3 or 6 weeks every summer. And as a parent, I remember thinking God, what did my parents do all that time when they were not working at all or very little? My dad worked in the summer sometimes. And my sister and I were both gone, just gone. But camp was a huge part of our childhood, and we were both there from tiny kids to counselors and just spent a whole lot of time there. So, and then we took a lot of trips. My parents were big travelers, and so we took a whole lot of trips all over the place during the summer. And then once when my dad had a sabbatical, we went to Europe for 6 months. So they were pretty adventurous.
That's great. Do you think that they were with a focus on education, these trips?
Yes, I do. And I remember I was in kindergarten when we went to Europe. It was a bit wasted on me, but my sister was in 3rd grade, and her teacher said, you have to keep a journal and you have to draw pictures. And so I remember her doing a lot of that work, and my parents being very engaged in making sure that work got done, and that she was, we were taken to a lot of museums and a lot of churches in Europe.
Did you have any influential school experiences that were as influential as some of these extracurricular experiences?
I feel like I had some very, very good teachers along the way. I feel, my favorite teacher was Mrs. Hunter. She was 3rd grade. And I remember that after that, I never really thought about doing anything else except being a teacher. So I was one of those lucky people that went to high school, went to college, and everything I did in that course of, my classes and my life had to do with knowing that I wanted to become a teacher. So I do feel that way. And I also was president of the student council when I was in 7th and 8th grade. And that kind of strikes me as funny now because I'm in so many, on so many boards and lead so many different things, and it seems to have started very young. So,
so when did you come to Monona?
I came to Monona when I was pregnant with my son. He is now going to be 21 in August, so it's been 21 years. We lived on the east side of Madison by Obrick Gardens before that, and we had a 2-bedroom house, which I loved very much. But my husband at the time was running a construction business out of our house. He now has a much larger business, and it's in an office. But his business was being run out of the same room that my daughter Amelia was living in, and I was pregnant, or sleeping in, and I was pregnant with Kevin. So we knew that we wanted to move, and we had quite a bit of conflict over moving to Monona. We found the house, and it was in need of a lot of repair, which my ex-husband wanted to do. But there was a lot of conflict about moving out of Madison, particularly because Amelia was going to be starting school. And being the good liberals that we are, there was a lot of guilt about coming out of the Madison School District and going into a suburb. We got a lot of teasing from our neighbors on our old street who were, giving us, being concerned about us moving to the suburbs and white flight and all of that. And we felt it ourselves, but the house was too good to pass up. He was still working out of our house, and it had a lot of room, and it was a very, very good price because it needed a ton of work, which he did before we moved in. So it's funny because now neither one of us wants to leave Monona ever. And we probably wish that the other one would. But here we are.
Oh, that's great. Are you still in that house?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Wow, good. So tell me about your neighborhood. Has it changed over the time you've been there? And if it has, how?
We were never, I live on the north end of Winnequa, and we were never a real kid-heavy area. It's, I'm kind of on a street that doesn't have a lot of streets off of it. So when we moved in, our neighbors across the street, the Weisbergs, had kids who were nearly exactly the ages of my children. And that family and our family were, I wouldn't say our families, but our kids were very close growing up and yelled out the windows of their bedrooms to each other and did like cans with strings and all that kind of stuff, lemonade stands. And then our other neighbor was our babysitter, but there weren't a ton of kids, but there was definitely that little group. Now there are no kids really up there at all. And a lot of my neighbors are the same as they were when we moved in. Long time neighbors. Mm-hmm. So it's a very nice feeling, even though all those little kids that were running around are now gone. But it's still nice that, my little alley, my little dead-end alley is the same families, and we've all been there for, over 20 years.
Yeah, that's nice.
It is.
It's rare. So what does your family enjoy doing together now?
Well, my family now, I guess, would be defined as me and Amelia, because my son Kevin lives downtown and is very busy and has a very active social life. So we don't see him very much. He's 20, and when we can see him, it's great, but we don't see him that much. So I would say Amelia and I, we live together, and she jokes that she doesn't want to do anything but live together because that's enough for her. However, we do also have a radio show on WVMO together, and so that takes some time each week for us to do that. And then my extended family is very close, and in fact, my mother, who still lives in Ann Arbor, is moving to Madison this summer, July. So Amelia and I will be dealing with having another family member here, and what that will be like. She's moving into Oakwood in Sun Prairie.
Oh,
So, yeah.
that'll be a big change.
It will be a big change, yes.
So let's talk about your profession.
Okay.
What do you do, and how long have you been doing it, and why did you choose it?
Well, like I said, I was pretty much born to be a teacher. I haven't ever really considered doing anything else. I taught fourth grade for 5 or 6 years in Dayton before we moved here for my ex-husband to go to graduate school. And then I didn't teach at all when my kids were young. I was more of a stay-at-home mom, although I worked in retail and bookstores during that time. But then after my son went to kindergarten, I started teaching at the preschool where he went to school, which is Monona Grove Nursery School. And it's on Buckeye, which is very close to my house. He loved it there. He spent 3 years there, and it was very good for him. And of course, when he was there, I was on the board, president of the board, very involved in the school. It's a parent co-op. And so when he went to kindergarten, there was an opening for a 2-day-a-week 3-year-old teacher, and I applied for it, and I've been there ever since. So that's been 15 years. So I teach 3-year-olds 2 days a week, Thursdays and Fridays. And then about 10 years ago, I became the school's director. So I do that work the rest of the time. Administrative work, managing the staff, all that kind of stuff. So
Still a parent co-op?
Still a parent co-op. We're celebrating our 60th year this year. So yes, it's a great experience. I really like working with the young kids, 3 to 5-year-olds we have, and the young parents who, you do a lot of hand-holding when you have that age kid.
Sure.
So, but it's been really great to get to know a lot of young parents in Monona and on the east side of Madison. And, I see kids that I had in my class everywhere I go. And that's a really fun thing,
Yes.
It also makes you make sure that you take a shower and look decent before you go anywhere.
That's right. That's right. So your son graduated and you never did.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
So do you attend any of the Monona festivals?
I usually do. Yeah. Just went to the pop-up beer garden to promote WVMO and our show, My Fair Ladies. The 4th of July, and I don't go to the parade anymore. I was happy when my kids were done marching in the parade and I had to go. And so I don't have to go. I spent so many years with them marching with their Girl Scout troop or their football team or their band or whatever. So yeah, I don't do that anymore, but Monona does have a lot of fun things to do. So
yes, absolutely. So I know you have a dog.
Yes, I do.
Tell me about your dog.
My dog is Izzy. She's a 5-year-old Shih Tzu, and I love her, and she's great. We had, when Amelia was growing up, Amelia and Kevin were growing up, we had a Gordon Setter named Ginger, who was our family dog for the whole time that my kids were little. And when she died, I said, no, I can't do this again. I was so distraught and so just sad. I mean, she was old and there was lots of things going on. But then I took care of a friend's dog for a summer, this little tiny dog, and I said, I have to have a dog. So now I have a dog. Yes.
Well, have you ever thought about moving somewhere else?
That's been an ongoing debate in my mind for a lot of years, probably since I got divorced. But I've kind of come to realize that I don't have any desire to live anywhere except for Monona. And I can't really articulate why, but I I look around and I think about going to a condo or going to an apartment, and I just don't want to leave Monona. And it's not even that I would want to live like, right outside Monona, close. I want to live in Monona, and I don't know why that is, but it is. So I'm going to stay in my house until something perfect comes along that's inside the boundaries of Monona, which is hard because, Monona is kind of...
Yes.
So we'll see.
So tell me about the changes you've seen in your shopping habits and businesses that you frequent. And I imagine in all these years in Monona, you've seen a lot of changes with the retail parts of the city, and certainly along Monona Drive. What great things used to be here that you miss?
Well, that's a bad question for me because I have such a horrible memory. But Ben Franklin, was a big part of my life. I mean, we were there all the time, and I live right near there. So, that was kind of a hard hit when that went. I also would always go to Artisan Gift Shop in the same mall for gifts and things like that, and I miss that. I feel like we're kind of in a really good place in Monona in terms of like restaurants and, interesting places. I think we're coming to a good place where, every, Cozy Home opened and Booth 121 opened, and there's all kinds of places that are kind of cute and fun. Of course, there's still some places that are not so great, but I feel like it's Monona Drive in itself has just become a much more interesting place over the years and is, keeps moving in that direction.
Good. So I know you're very involved in things happening in Monona. So I'm going to ask you a broad question, but I expect you'll have several answers for it. Tell me about your role on different committees in the city.
Well, I would say that I really started getting, I guess at Kevin's preschool when I was on the board and making decisions and leading the board, I kind of got back into the groove that took me back to student council, right? Like I was kind of running the meetings and organizing people and making sure things got done, and there was just a lot to it. And then when my kids went to Maywood, I joined the PTO and quickly became co-presidents with my friend Jane Beebe, who you should also interview because she went to kindergarten here and is now raising her kids here. But we together were co-presidents of the PTO for a very long time, many years. And I feel like I just threw myself into that kind of stuff. Like I always tell people I'm going to eventually write a book. And the book is going to be about the dynamic of people in cities and towns who feel the need to volunteer and work on things outside of their own home or job, and people who don't feel that. And I get a lot of reaction from friends of mine or from people that I work with about how much work I do that is not paid. And I think that's just interesting because I think it's kind of the view you have of your city or of your community and what it takes to be the kind of community that you want it to be. And there are just people who would never think about joining a committee or being on a board or whatever. And then there are people who always want to be on a board or on a committee or whatever. And it's interesting because like my first experience my second, I guess, experience was with Jane. And then we've been on a couple other boards together and a couple other committees together. And it's been 25 years. And she still is one that if I called her and said, hey, do you want to do this? She'd be like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas other people, you just can't even imagine. So someday I'm going to write that book about what it means for a community to have people who who want to give of their time and find something about that satisfactory. But right now, I am on the library board, president of the library board, which is a lot of responsibility and a lot of work, but super fun. And I'm also on the Friends of the Monona Library. And on that, in that role, I am the coordinator of Loud in the Library, which is a fundraiser for the library. And then I'm also on the board of MG21, which is the Monona Grove Alternative School, high school up at Nichols, now a high school and a middle school, starting next year. So that's a great thing that I just started in January. And for many years before that, I served on the Monona Grove Education Foundation, which is the kind of fundraising arm of the Monona Grove School District. And they give a lot of teacher grants and support a lot of kind of big initiatives in the Monona Grove School District. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the things I've done over the years, and I'm doing currently. And people say like, oh my gosh, you're on 3 boards. How are you on 3 boards? And I'm like, it's not that hard. It's like once a month and you do what you're supposed to do, and things couldn't happen in the city without it. So,
Yes, I think we're all thankful for people like you. So how has your perception of community needs changed as a result of all of this work you've done?
Well, I will say that my work on the library board and with the library in general has been very educational in terms of people who use the library, our service area or whatever, who are not kind of the people that I hang out with. There's a wide variety of people who use this library, even though it's in a community that's, fairly wealthy and fairly middle class-ish and fairly white, but it's not as demographically what I thought it was. And there's a lot of parts of Monona that use this library that I wasn't really aware of. So I think that's an important thing. And I keep in touch enough with the schools to know that things have changed since my kids were in elementary school, and that there's a much greater need for a lot of support for those schools. So it's been interesting to watch the city evolve, I think, over the last few years.
Are there trends you see that frighten you with how the community's changing?
I think several years back, one of the things that I got very involved in, another thing, was when, I guess over the years, I've always been very interested in keeping our school district a combined district between Monona and Cottage Grove. And there's a strong feeling in Monona, and also in Cottage Grove probably, that sometimes we come up against things and people think we should not be a combined district. And so I guess when you said, are there things that make you worry, that's something that makes me worry. And there was a time when we were trying to raise the money to build Glacial Drumlin, the middle school in Cottage Grove, where there was a lot of studies done about how few kids there were in Monona and how Monona was so old, and how the city was not doing enough to attract families to the city. At the same time, people wanted to be supported in staying in their houses as they age. And so I remember feeling a little bit worried about that, and kind of, is Monona going to become not a place where families want to be? And I think now it's such a desired community for families, and it's people that I talk to all the time who don't live here, young families, would love to live here, partly because of the schools, but also partly just because of the kind of sweet nature of the layout of the city, and all the big trees and all the, kind of folksy little bait shop park, stuff like that. So I guess I don't worry anymore, because I feel like it's a pretty desirable place to be, and we're working all the time to make it more desirable.
Great. So what is something that you tell a person who's considering moving to Monona today?
Well, I have those conversations a lot. And I talk about how it's so close to Madison that, you're practically in Madison, and you can go down and do all the things in Madison that anybody wants to do on State Street or at Overture or any of the things. But that it does have a very small town feel. And that I, just by virtue of being involved in things, know everyone on city council. I know the mayor really well. I go to the pop-up beer garden and meet a ton of people that I know, see a ton of people that I know, partly because of my job, but partly just because I've been here for so long. And I feel like it does still have that like a Mayberry quality to it, which, is kind of silly, but is also, I still see, kids riding their bikes and still coming to the library on their bike, going to the pool, doing the whole thing down here where you can, go to the Dream Park, go to the library, go to the pool, spend your whole day down in downtown Monona. So I tell them that it's, a little bit idyllic, but also a place where anybody who wants to get involved in something can. And, just I've gotten involved in the library, but if someone wanted to come and get involved in something else, they certainly could. And there's lots of opportunities to do that. So civically minded people, I think, would be a good match for this city.
Mm-hmm. So you certainly got a lot of accomplishments under your belt. What's the thing you're most proud of?
Well, I'm ridiculously proud of my school and how we've kind of stuck to our philosophy in the face of accelerated, pushing of children to do more at a younger age. And I'm really happy when I'm in the building and everyone is playing and being appropriate and not having to do worksheets or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I'm very proud of that. And I guess Loud in the Library, I would have to say, is another something that I'm very proud of. It was, a tiny little idea, and now we've done 3 of them, and they've been so successful, both financially and people really, we do a survey afterwards, and people say, we got out in the middle of winter and saw all of our friends and neighbors, and it was a fun party to be at. And I think that that's equally as important as raising money, which is the goal. But the fact that people of all ages and people who, may not know each other, but we get all the older people to serve beer, and we get people to scoop ice cream, and we get a band, and people are dancing, and it's fun. So I think the people that I've met through organizing that event and just the success of it is another pretty proud accomplishment, I would say.
Good. So what is the thing that you want people to know about you, remember about you when you're gone?
Oh my gosh.
What's your legacy?
Well, that's hard, but I guess I would want it to be something along the lines of, I loved giving my time and energy to better the city of Monona. And if all people felt that same kind of drive or desire to give a little bit of their time then things would be it would be a very satisfying thing for everyone, but it would also be such a great thing for Monona. And I remember when we were on the PTO, Jane and I, and we would be like, okay, there's 700 parents in this school and we are doing every single thing. That can be hard and it can be demoralizing. But I also just feel like you create the community you want. And I want a community where people feel like things are happening and like they can get involved and that they can make it better, and that the library, which is my thing right now, is growing and changing and making better and better and better things like this, because we're raising money to do it. So I guess that's, something along those lines.
Well, you are certainly leading by example.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue Carr.